Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The next topic for today's weekly updates from the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission to Ukraine about security situation in eastern Ukraine. Mr. Alexander Hook, Principal Deputy Chief Monitor of the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission to Ukraine. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. As you are all, with no doubt aware, there was a serious localized upsurge in violence in Donetsk region on 10 and 11 April this week. More about that later. For the moment, let me address the security situation we observed last week. Last week there were at least 10% less ceasefire violations recorded by the Special Monitoring Mission compared to the week immediately before the latest recommitment to the ceasefire on 30th March. 95% of the recorded violence occurred in 4 locations, meaning most areas in Donbass were relatively calm and peaceful. Dear friends, last week was a week that demonstrated just how tantalizing close we are to reaching full ceasefire compliance. It was a week that showed that it is possible to stop the shooting, to stop the killing. A week in which, if only briefly, there was a hope that civilians in eastern Ukraine could live without fear. Last week was, however, like so many others we have seen before, in which hopes are raised and then dashed. A week in which the sides show they can reduce the level of violence. A week in which it seemed the meaning of Easter was understood, in which hope might conquer fear. A week like so many before, when the sides on the surface seem committed to ending nearly 4 years of suffering among the civilian population. But look closer, and it is obvious that the needs of the civilian population were never to the forefront. It is obvious that there was no serious commitment to stop the killing. The military mindset prevailed as ever over a civilian one. The armed formations in Luhansk have, for instance, announced that they are going to violate the Minsk agreement by lining up large amounts of hardware in the city center of Luhansk on May 9th. Already they are preparing to have pre-positioned the weapons on the southeastern outskirts of Luhansk city. Here in this image, taken by an OSCE SMM unmanned aerial vehicle, you can see the sheer size of the build-up in an area that is within agreed withdrawal lines, less than 13 kilometers from the contact line, and as such a violation of the Minsk agreements. 7 tanks, 7 self-propelled howitzers, 7 multiple launch rocket systems, 7 surface-to-air missile systems, and 10 towed howitzers. Often the proscribed weapons we observed were hidden right next to residential houses. Here in non-government controlled Verkhno-Shirokivske, less than 2 kilometers from the contact line, you can see how the armed formations used civilian housing to conceal 2 tanks. I dread to think what the impact would be on those living there if those tanks were targeted. The same military logic was evident on the other side of the contact line too. Near government-controlled Anadol, also in violation of agreed withdrawal lines, our monitoring officers observed 6 self-propelled howitzers. Also underlining that the sides have not prioritized the needs of the civilian population, the SMM observed no progress on demining. In fact, we saw the opposite. We saw recently laid mines near residential areas and entry-exit checkpoints. We saw, for example, for the first time an anti-tank mine in a field on the southern edge of government-controlled Lomakine. In addition, an SMM unmanned aerial vehicle spotted for the first time 8 anti-tank mines laid across the road near government-controlled Starokhnaktivka, about 300 mines near non-government controlled Zaitsevo, and about 320 anti-tank mines in areas southwest of government-controlled Avdiivka. Here, in this image, you can see that an OSCE SMM unmanned aerial vehicle also spotted at least 50 anti-tank mines in a field southeast of government-controlled Popasna, right on the contact line. All unequivocal violations of agreed commitments, all endangering civilians, all very clear, concrete and dangerous signs that the military logic prevails. Another obvious sign, again a violation of commitments made by the sides, was the complete lack of progress made on disengagement of forces and formations. Sitting in trenches, sometimes just 50 meters apart, the sides last week again signaled their intention to continue practices they have brought only death and destructions to the civilians they purportedly fight on behalf of. Dear friends, the relative respite last week was bound to be short-lived. On Tuesday night and early Wednesday morning this week, the unsuspecting people of Staro-Mikhailivka were the first to know just how short-lived the respite was to be. Our monitoring officers have since been actively monitoring in Staro-Mikhailivka and other affected areas, and they have reported accordingly. The facts they have established, many relating to the destruction of civilian properties and the injury of civilians, do not make for pleasant reading. More than a dozen impact sites, all residential homes in which children were woken from their sleep with the terrifying sound of artillery rounds crashing into their homes and neighborhoods. There are many injuries. The events that might demonstrate a reckless disregard for the civilian population, a callousness even, given that only 2 days previously people in this town had celebrated Easter. They had dared to hope, having seen a decrease in the level of violence, they had thought the worst was over. Dear friends, last year 480 civilians at least were killed or injured. So far this year, not counting the latest victims this week, 39 civilians have been killed or injured. The combined number, 519, not only represents the number of civilians killed and injured, it also stands for the number of times where the protection of civilians has failed. The only long-term sustainable protection for the civilian population lies in full compliance with the provision of the Minsk agreements. Only when the sides withdraw weapons, disengage forces and formations, demine and ceasefire, only then will the civilians of eastern Ukraine be safe. In the meantime, so long as the sides fail to comply with their commitments, as we continue to see them do, there urgently needs to be new thinking on how best to minimize the worst effects of the conflict on the civilian population. It is clear from recent events that the military mindset prevails. In the absence of a civilian mindset, the best we can do and now hope for, at least in the short term, is that those ordering and carrying out violence will at the minimum adopt a protection mindset. There are a range of mitigation measures that could be taken to protect the civilian population. If the sides refuse to stop fighting, then, for example, they should at the minimum agree to the non-use of weapons with wide area effects such as mortars and artillery in populated residential areas. They are designed for use in open battlefields. Or a prohibition on the positioning of hardware and personnel in residential areas. They invariably invite retaliatory fire that impacts the civilians living there. Possibly the most urgent action required is immediate demining. In 2017, 145 civilians were injured or lost their lives as a result of explosions of mines or unexploded ordnance. 41 of them died, 20 of them were children, 2 killed and 18 injured. Already this year, with just over 3 months of the year gone, 17 people have been injured and 7 killed from mines and unexploded ordnance. And it is continuing. This week, our monitoring officers facilitated the recovery of the charred remains of 4 family members killed when their vehicle apparently hit a mine near Stanica Luhansk. Dear friends, we have heard the promises before. We have seen the sides sign on the dotted line, committing themselves to take the necessary actions to end the violence. They have, in the Minsk agreements as far back as 2014, agreed to stop mining and indeed to remove the mines. In 2016, they made a similar promise. Enough waiting, enough excuses, enough death and injuries. Demine now. We in the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission stand ready to assist. In the past year and a half, we have in fact facilitated humanitarian demining on around 30 occasions and localized demining to enable infrastructure repairs on hundreds of occasions. Dear friends, there have since the beginning of 2017 been at least 519 failures of the duty of care towards the civilian population in eastern Ukraine. 519 civilian casualties, 519 times we can count. The true number of failures of duty of care is in reality uncountable. With every civilian injured or killed, those in authority of positions of power have failed to protect those they are supposed to protect. With the end of violence seemingly so close, but in reality so far as away as ever, the sides must protect the civilian population. The sides should aim at 0 civilian casualties. They have the power and authority to achieve this objective if they want to. Our reports provide a good basis of what needs to change to achieve this. 0 civilian casualties. 0. To achieve this, there needs to be a holistic, systematic, and collaborative approach to the protection of civilians, one that commits to those in commission and position of powers and authority to a duty of care, one that holds them accountable, one that ensures that there are 0 failures to protect civilians in eastern Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hook. Now it's time for questions. Dear colleagues, you are welcome.
Crimean News Agency. My question is related to the information published in the reports on the deployment of hardware at the Lugansk airfield. Yesterday, a representative of militants said it was hardware. It's not in violation because it's prepared for the parade on the 9th of May. Whether it's true or not, and do you consider it as a violation?
The Minsk agreement foresee no exception to what is stipulated there. These weapons must be withdrawn beyond the withdrawal lines. They're currently not, hence a violation. Thank you.
More questions? No more questions. One more. Sorry.
One more question. Yesterday in your SMM report, you reported that the following day, tomorrow, there will be a flooding of Yunkom mine where they have nuclear testing back in the Soviet Union, and the miners cannot predict any consequences of such nuclear testing. Do you in SMM have capacity to monitor the situation around this mine, and do you talk to the Ukrainian authorities about any possibility to influence this situation, because it might trigger some environmental risks?
Thank you. The Special Monitoring Mission, as you know, is mandated to establish facts, and the facts, as you have correctly referred to, are available in our daily reports. We will continue to establish these facts, including, if permitted, around this mine, and we will publish these. However, we are not to speculate what the consequences may be. Those who have access to our reports are to draw their conclusions on them, as these reports are available to all our participating states and the public, and they're available on our website in Ukrainian, Russian and English languages. Thank you.
If there is no more questions, thank you, and let's finish.
Thank you.